Hello, everyone. How are you guys doing? You ladies, you gents, you beautiful people, wherever it is that you're tuning in from in the world, please let me know. Say hello in the comments. I would love to hear from you. Um, this is going to be a panel in which it's just me by myself. I am going to be talking about just what activism looks like in the diaspora and the different efforts of Nubian youth. And before I actually begin this panel, there's a Nubian youth that I would like to give a shout out to. This Nubian youth is my cousin Rami Dawood. His birthday is actually today. So Rami, kulli sana wa anta tayyib. Qabla ala manik inshallah. So that is for Rami Dawood. And so I wanted to kind of just have a conversation with you guys. And I'm sorry I'm wearing my hoodie. Caught a bit of a cold and got the chills. So I just wanted to kind of have a conversation with everybody about what it means to be a Nubian activist, what it means to be a youth, how that looks exactly, and what everything is kind of about and how it's going, what happened, my story, how I got affiliated with TNI. And again, this is me speaking in my personal capacity, not speaking in not speaking as an affiliate of TNI, but speaking in myself as Mazen. And so there's a term that's been coined for this, and it's called accidental activism. So accidental activism is basically you kind of finding yourself in the middle of a movement without actually having the intention to have done that initially. I am not an accidental activist, unfortunately, and I wouldn't use that term to describe myself. The reason why is because I feel like Nubian culture is something that I'm very passionate about. The heritage, the language, everything is it's something that I'm very passionate about. So I wouldn't quite call myself the accidental activist. I found that in moving forward, in explaining and teaching people about things, I have had to become an activist in that regard, absolutely. And so I'm just kind of going to explain to everybody about my journey with Nubia Fest 2020, how all of that came together. And this is an open discussion, so if anybody would like to join me on this panel, you're more than welcome to. I'm going to drop the link here, and we're going to have this conversation. So to kind of begin, my affiliation with TNI, with the Nubian Initiative, kind of began maybe, let's give or take, about 2 years ago. 2 years ago, or a year ago and some change, when the Sudanese revolution was kind of occurring. Dima actually followed me on Twitter, and what she ended up seeing in my Twitter bio just said actual Nubian. Sudanese, and it said actual Nubian. And the reason why I actually chose to put actual Nubian in there is because you'll find that a lot of time Nubian culture is appropriated without people actually giving credit or without people actually understanding things. So Nubian has become synonymous with black, and so you'll find that people will say, I'm a Nubian queen without exactly understanding what Nubian queen is, or they'll say I'm a Nubian king without understanding exactly what Nubian king is. And so Dima and I had this conversation about, and why actual Nubian was in my Twitter bio. And then from there, it kind of progressed forward. I explained to her just the things that I was working on. So I run a nonprofit here in New York called SWAG, which stands for Sophisticated, Worthy, and Gifted Gentlemen. Shout out to members of SWAG. And basically, what SWAG is, it's an organization that sought to get young Black men off of the streets and into positive community building. And there was 3 phases that we kind of had organized in order to do this. And the phases were the following. So the first is getting them to function as a support system for each other. And I noticed that in New York City, the graduation rate for young Black men from high school into college was only 56%. And so this was something that I needed to deal with. And so we started this program where we got young Black men to meet together and to talk about issues that were affecting them, issues that society deems inappropriate, such as or things that young black men aren't supposed to talk about, like how I'm feeling, why I'm sad, my emotions, what's going on in my personal life, and we gave them a safe space to kind of talk about these things, and then from there work as a support system academically and socially, and being involved in the community, and that will help them be tight in it and graduating high school and then going on to college. So I was explaining these things to Dima, and from there we kind of got connected, and she told me about Africa Week 2020, which I was a part of in June. Yep. June. Yes, in June. And as a result of Africa Week 2020, I ended up becoming what is called an Ubuntu Fellow. And so an Ubuntu Fellow is a person who works with an organization. You are essentially an apprentice to whoever it is that is in the organization. And I'm actually also Abdel Wahab Sirag's Ubuntu Fellow as well from I Will Coaching. Coach, shout out to you for everything that you've done. So I'm also his Ubuntu Fellow as well. And from there, I'm actually his Ubuntu Fellow first, and then the TNI's Ubuntu Fellow second. But nevertheless, from there, we started talking about Nubia, and our love of Nubia, and how we need to make sure that Nubian youth are understanding just what it is that their culture has and their society has, and what we offer to the world, what our language offers to the world, what our heritage offers to the world, what our culture offers to the world. And from there, she plugged me into two other amazing PhDs, so Dr. Vincent and Alexandros. And next thing I know, I'm the only person in a group chat of four who didn't have a PhD, and I'm learning so many different things from all these people. And we started planning Nubia Fest 2020. That's kind of the short version of what had actually happened. And so my activism is a little different. I'm actually, so I write poetry to kind of teach people about what's going on in Nubia, and what's going on out there. And for those of you who may have seen one of my poems, apparently caused a massive ruckus, because I was explaining the word Kandaka and the origins of the word Kandaka, and how I had been appropriated post Sudanese revolution, and just how there are, there's not enough light shed on the Nubian plight and what is going on with Nubian people back in Sudan. And so I write poetry. You can find my poetry on my Instagram page, which I will put right there. Actually, that's my handle on all social media. You can find me there, but my poetry is listed there. And you'll find the poems there that explain things in relation to Nubian history, in relation to Nubian culture, in relation to how I feel about things. You're also going to find several posts there with a masjid that is flooded. I think I'm going to pull up the picture for you guys, and I will explain to you what this picture is. Let me see if I can find this. If I can't find it, I will just pull it up on my Instagram for all of you to see. Okay, so that's not letting me find it. Let me pull it up on my Instagram for everybody, and I will show you guys the picture that I am referring to. So you guys will see what it is. Okay. And please let me know if you can see this, or if you cannot. I would greatly appreciate that. All right, if you can all see that, that is actually one of the pictures from Wadi Halfa, which is where my father was born. And that is the masjid that was drowned. And so after the building of the dam, essentially Halfa was flooded. And so this is a masjid that was in our village and completely underwater, and this is one of the things, one of the images that I personally keep with me that remind me of what it is that I am fighting for, what it is that I am pushing for, and just what's happened. And you see this water back here. This is atrocious. But there's houses under this water, and as was said in the film Irki, there are people under this water. There's history that's under this water. I'm going to see if I have the other picture. This right here is one of the other pictures, and this is this is the flooding of Nubia right here. And I think I don't have the picture of the palm trees, but there is a picture of the palm trees that are underwater. Let me find that for you. This is also one of the other pictures that definitely reminds me of that how I need to keep fighting. This right here. This is another masjid that's underwater. It's actually, I believe it's the same masjid after the water has receded some, but don't quote me on that. But I'm going to, I think it's, yes, okay. This is the picture of palm trees. Palm trees are so important to Nubians for so many different reasons. Now, you're probably wondering, well, they're just trees. Why are they important? The reason why they're important is because what palm trees signify for us are is familial connections. And what I mean by that is you'll see that people will come and gather under palm trees when something happens, and they will begin to, kind of explain family ties. And so palm trees are very important to us. And I just want you folks to just think about this for a sec. This is the top of the trees, right? This is the top of the trees that's in this picture right here. If this is the top of the trees, imagine how high this water is, and what else is under there. What else is under the water there. So that's, this is one of the things that keeps me going, and that keeps me fighting, and that keeps me pushing in order to have people acknowledge just this culture and this heritage. Now I wanted to talk about a little bit more, and I wanted to talk about the activism that Nubian youth have engaged in different avenues. So as I mentioned earlier, Rami is a musician, and so Rami, through his music, he has worked to keep Nubian culture alive. He has a song, which I will find for you guys momentarily. I will play for you. Give me 1 second. And here, this song is actually really important because it gets to the heart of what it is that I'm talking about. And so I'm gonna play this song for everybody. And I want you guys to kind of really listen to what's being said. I'm gonna make it full screen so everybody can see everything. Okay. Whoop, wrong one. That's it right here. Okay. When the sun is sleeping, you shine in its place. A beautiful key of astronomical grace. You flow like water into my dreams as oxygen. You bring me to life with silver beam kisses on my face. I am your witty Sahara Nati. I am your witty Sahara Nati.
Sibuya, Meno, Irminga, Kukeno, Mingo Kago, Naringo Minga, Nagi Keno, Mawaka Hika, Naigai, Kessa, Nana, dancing on me, Kessa, Ilin, Irbimini, dancing, Shogiri, Hido Duo, Hido Duo. Hiddo dafo, ilim dafiro, hiddo juwo, nai Don Marco, sikiri Don Marco, nai Don Marco, sikiri Don Marco. I am your witty Sahara Nati. I am your witty I misplaced my own shadow, and I'm begging you to find me. I reached the edge of the plateau. Through your brain, you say, guide me. There's much to hide, you help me see. Only the strong survive, I'm grown so weak. My eyes are dry and burned from lack of sleep. I no longer have the ability to cry, and I wonder why you don't reach out to me and share your tears. You have the power to quench my thirst when I come near. But first, I must make an attempt wholeheartedly and truly sincere.
Okay, beautiful. And so that is Rami Dawood Sahara Unati, and I'm going to explain the words for those of you who didn't understand, who don't understand Nubian. But in the beginning, he's essentially asking, "Who are you? Do you know who you are? Why is it that you don't know who you are or where you come from?" And so he's channeling, or he's actually taking his. Rami says this in multiple interviews, that Malcolm X is a really big inspiration for him. And so he takes Malcolm X's speech and he kind of translates it into Nubian, and he asks, "Who are you?" And so he's explaining, if you don't know who you are, then there's no way you can move forward. There's no way that you can know where it is that you're going, which is true. And so for us as Nubian youth, if we don't know who we are, if we don't know what our culture is, how can we then move forward in the world or know where it is that we are going? And Rami speaks about this in multiple songs, and he speaks about this in multiple interviews, the importance of kind of holding on to culture and holding on to who we are. And that's a very important form of activism. When people think of activism, they think about marches and protests and things like that. But there are many different avenues by which people can be activists. I, for example, as I said, write poetry. Rami, for example, advocates through his music, and that's a very important thing. I want to share with you guys again another instance of advocacy, or what it is that we, or different ways in which that we can advocate. And so I'm going to go back to my Instagram really quickly. And I hope everybody can see this. If you cannot see it, I'm going to read what it says to you. And so this was from when the dams in Dal and Kajbar were being built. And this is when Dal, Kajbar, and Shirek, actually, there were 3 dams that were being built. And so this was a protest that we held outside of the UN. I believe this was in 2016. The picture says 2017. That's when I posted and started using Instagram. But I want to say this was 2015, 2016. So here in the picture, it says, the Aswan Dam resulted in over 5,000 Nubians forcibly removed. And that's actually a little bit, 5,000 on the Sudanese side. The number on the Egyptian side was approximately 6,000. So we're talking about, give or take, 11,000 people that were removed, and drowned over 45 villages. So inevitably, it led to the destruction of Nubia, to Nubian history, Nubian culture, Nubian language, which is why you'll find that a lot of Nubian youth currently don't speak the language, or don't know too much about what it is, and even people not just in the diaspora, but people back home as well. And then it said, today the Nubian people are thrown into a crude deja vu in the plans to build the dams proceed over 1,000. If the plans to build the dams proceed, over 10,000 more Nubians will be forcibly displaced. They will have to leave their history behind. Over 90 villages will be submerged under the river Nile, and over 500 archaeological sites will be destroyed. And this is, when we're talking about just the scope of things, we're talking about 500 archaeological sites are not just 500 archaeological sites. This is world culture and heritage sites that will be destroyed. 90 villages doesn't sound like a massive number, but if you think about the amount of people that live in those villages and what it is that's going to happen to those people, and the trauma that comes along with having to be moved from your land, having to find jobs, having to acclimate to a new environment, just as was said in the film Irki, it becomes such a massive issue, and it's trauma that is going to continue to be perpetuated. So this was another form of activism. Actually, the building behind me here in the blue or green, or a little colorblind, but this building back here is actually the UN. So this was in front of the UN, where in New York, where we had protested. We'd actually also gone to the White House as well, and several Nubians from several different places, including Boston, showed up, and several Nubians from Boston, from DC, from New York. We all rode down to DC, and we protested outside of the White House about the buildings of the dams, Dal and Kajbar and Shirek, which would have inevitably flooded the rest of Nubia as well. So this is another means by which I have, or another form of activism that we have shown. There was the slogan for this actually was Lala Sudud. So again, this was the picture that you guys saw earlier, that you folks saw earlier. So here it is, Lala Sudud. Let me show you. So this is the picture here with the slogan Lala Sudud. And so, activism it comes in many different forms, many different shapes, many different ways. Advocacy comes in many different ways. Advocacy is not just sometimes organizing protests or things like that. It's also educating people, which is one of the main goals of TNI. There was a massive debate around the word Kandaka, which I was at the center of, unfortunately. But just who can be called a Kandaka, who can't be called a Kandaka, what is the origins of the Kandaka, and TNI so graciously called together a bunch of different scholars and held a panel about it. And the scholars included Solange, included Dr. Ashby. Dr. Ashby included Dr. Vincent, I believe Dr. Ann Jennings. I'm not sure if she's finished her program yet. Dr. Deborah Hurd, and a bunch of other individuals who were able to talk about these topics. And that's also, a different way by which we show activism. There's currently there's organizations currently like the Nubian Investment Forum as well, which have sought to invest money and time and effort into places where Nubians reside, and that's also another form of advocacy as well. Shout out to the Nubian Investment Forum, who had a panel, who actually started off Nubia Fest, and their panel was amazing. Dua Farid from the Nubian Voices also explained another form of advocacy and another form of activism in the diaspora, which was through discussing things like the media, the portrayal of people in the media, the portrayal of Nubian people in the media. She was specifically talking about the Egyptian media, but nevertheless, that's another form of advocacy and another form of activism, because now you're causing people to kind of think about why is it that certain individuals are portrayed a certain way. And so that's another form as well. But I just dropped the link here for the conversation. If anybody would like to join me in this conversation and ask any questions, or explain how they have advocated, or how they have the means by which they have participated in activism in the diaspora for Nubian youth, please, you're more than welcome to come. I welcome you. I would love to have you on this conversation with me, and I would love to hear your take, your perspective, things that have worked for you and things that have not worked for you, and challenges that you faced. So I'm going to give a couple of minutes for anybody who would like to join. In the meantime, I'm going to play a Nubian song for everybody. Let me find. Actually, I'm going to play the Nubian national anthem. All right, thank you everybody for staying and joining. And so I actually played this song for two reasons. The first of those reasons was to give anybody who wanted to join the conversation an opportunity and some time to prepare and come in. But the second reason, which is a little bit more important, is language. There's a lot of people who won't, a lot of Nubian people who won't understand what's being said in that song. And that is because the language is gone. The language is missing. And so I was having a conversation with one of my relatives maybe 2 nights ago. And we were talking about, just what's going on in Halfa and why the youth in Halfa don't speak the language anymore. And he was telling me basically, his hypothesis is that, or it's not a hypothesis, this is actually what it is, because we've asked people, but that they don't see the value in the language anymore. And because they don't see the value in the language, therefore they see it as something that's useless, and so something that's not worth continuing and keeping forward, and something that needs to keep going. And that's a problem, and one of the ways in which we are continuing to be activists, whether knowingly or unknowingly, is by speaking the language itself, and so that's one of the things that I'm going to pledge to continue doing. And actually, my next session, my next panel after this is actually called Nerdy Nubians. I encourage you to tune in. It's very short. It's not too long. It's just an explanation of Nubian culture in different places and in places that you wouldn't have thought to have found it in. And it's really important because once you know who you are or know what your culture has and the value it has, you begin to pick up on these things in different places, whether that be through film, whether that be through writing, or these other avenues. So I encourage you all to tune in for the next session. I encourage you to continue commenting and letting me and us know ways in which you have, ways in which you've been an activist, or ways in which you've helped to promote Nubian culture, Nubian language, Nubian heritage, how we can continue to preserve it. I think that's a really important question. I know Majdi asked this question last night: how do we move forward? And that's a really important question, how we move forward. Making space for Nubian language and just the necessity of it. And I think that's something that I should have started off this panel with. But the necessity for activism is important, and I think I'm going to explain that, and that'll be the last thing, and then I'll go off the broadcast. But the reason why we need activism for Nubia is because there is a systematic erasure that's occurring everywhere the Nubians are of our culture. In Sudan, we've had our homeland, our cultural hub, flooded, and then we've been relocated, and where we've been relocated to has been inhospitable. And actually, there's a really great story that kind of explains that. And the story was that after the Nubians were relocated, and one of the Nubians asks one of the prime ministers, have you seen any plants growing in that place? And the prime minister says no. One of the ministers says, no, I haven't seen any plants growing there. And so he says, if plants can't grow there, what makes you think that we'll be able to survive there? And that's such a poignant thing. And that point is so eloquently made. But the relocation has, again, caused the language to disappear. It has caused the culture to disappear, the heritage to disappear. A lot of things that we used to do we're no longer capable of doing just because of where we are now. Again, going back to Irki and Shadi explaining life in Komombo, and the elders in the village explaining what life was like previously. It's really important to continue to advocating for these because of that systematic erasure that's occurred. The language is not being taught in school. There's no way to teach the language in school. My grandmother would tell me that, and actually my father and the generation right above us would tell me that they were beaten when they spoke the language in school, and they were told that they're supposed to speak Arabic. That generation has also told me when they would protest, for example, for Nubian related issues. People in Sudan would laugh at them and say, "Look at the Berbers." And Berber here, for those of you that don't know what the word Berber means, Berber is a negative word actually, and it means barbarians, or people who speak a language that's not understood. Bibarber, it's an Arabic word actually, and that's given to people who speak a language that's not generally understood, or not that the language is unintelligible, meaning that it's not a language, but just that people don't understand what it is that's being said. And so, people in Sudan would be like, "Oh, look, the Berbers are out again," and what are they, up in arms about, and what's going on? And so there's that, and even the word that has been used uh, the word that's been used for our language, Rotana. Rotana means gibberish, that which is not understood. Also, it's the equivalent of Berber. And so even that word, and I know a lot of people who are Nubian who will still say the word Rotana, and that's something that we also have to stop saying. It's not Rotana, it's Nubian, or Andandi, or language of the Kunuz, or Matoki, whatever it is that you want to use to describe the language, or the actual specific name of the language. But using words like Rotana, we can't we can't use that. And there's other things that have occurred that are political. In which Sudanese, for example, academics have written that there's we'll call it ancient Sudan and not Nubia, or not Kush, and there's a bunch of different things that have caused people to become activists for Nubian rights. But I won't keep this any longer. I won't make this any longer. I encourage you to tune in to Nerdy Nubian, happening in about 18 minutes, 20 minutes, give or take, where I will definitely be talking about just some things. Oh, I see. Minna has joined. Minna.
Hi.
Hello, hello.
So I joined, especially for this question, for this question around the word, or for this, raising the question of the word Rotana. Because I have a big, I have been among so many big debates around it. Okay. You know how when in so many communities words were used as a derogatory term, but then the country takes the word, strips it out of the derogatory meaning, repurposes it, and uses it. This is how the word Rotana became in our community. In my assessment, because often comes the Nubian Effendi that has been educated, going back to the village and asking everybody not to say the word Rotana because it's derogatory. While what has happened actually is that the word was taken, stripped out, like how so many words taken out so many homophobic words taken by the gay LGBTQ community, reappropriated and became owned. Owned by the community, or so many words owned by the Black community, and some words that still are recognized as offensive. We can say it, but other people can't. So I can call it Rotana. Another person, a Gurbati. I don't know if you use that term in Halfa, but a Gurbati cannot call me Gurbati. No. Gurbati is any non-Nubian. It's a pretty racist name by me, because I have to say.
Gorti?
Gurbati.
Gurbati, yeah. Gurbati is mixed, yeah.
Gurbati is not mixed. Gurbati is not Nubian. Gurbati in our culture and within Kaditra culture is often referring to people who are not Nubian at all.
Yeah, but that's because the word itself means a person who's mixed.
No, Gurbati, Guria means the land, and Gurbati is the person who digs the land, and it means faleh.
Oh, okay. And Halfawi means something different. So for us in Mahasi, it means a person, like a mixture, a conglomerate. I guess that's the better word for it. Yeah. Okay.
So I just wanted to share this because I also have a big issue with us going out there and getting good education and coming back to our village and trying to between brackets, emancipate.
Mm-hmm.
Have to be very, 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 as people who are trying to decolonize ourselves first. We
Mm-hmm.
cannot go with an authority to our villages and say and ask people to say, tell people what to say and what not to say. We have already had all these layers of privilege going into European colleges, Arab-speaking institutions, getting all these kind of resources around us, and without knowing, sometimes we carry some of these institutions into our village, and it becomes it requires them a continuous reflexive process by us always. Am I fighting something? Am I fighting something that is already been fought and won, or am
Mm-hmm.
I fighting for something that still needs to be fought? You know what I
Mm.
mean? Just
Yeah.
wanted to put this out there. I know I am sometimes annoying and come up with all these
La
negating
la la la. No,
things.
it's important, you know. Being you can't be in an echo chamber where everybody agrees with you, you know, and so it's very important to hear things from a different perspective and to hear a different perspective. So I genuinely appreciate that.
So
Um, mhm.
because also when we go to our villages and try to educate them, it becomes a top down approach,
Mhm.
and we become hated. I know that. I know that because I tried that. I would say 10 years ago, and I tried to say I'm going to go do projects for my people, and I ended up knowing that what my people actually needed is bigger than me. It's structural. It's the activism that is required is to actually stand against bigger structural issues. The issues are economic. The issues are major cultural impact from the outside coming in and wiping out what we are doing. And some things that had looked like worthy battles to me were trivial compared to the things I was really needed for. And the best use of my talents was actually to ask people, "What do you want me to do? What can
Mhm.
I, what?" Then I have these kinds of degrees. What do you want me to do for you? Or what do we want? What do you think us as Nubians would like to do? And this is why I'm really, really appreciated for this platform. We are all talking together. It's not just one area, one zone. People from Nubia, spanning from Egypt to Uganda, have risen today and have had voices raised and connected with each other. And I will shut up for a minute and mute myself and let you continue what you were saying.
No, no. I actually really appreciate what you said, Minna. I think in response to uh, people reclaiming words and stripping it of derogatory meanings and then using it themselves. I think one of the issues with that per se is that I think it's a generational thing. Yani, for us, we may use it a little differently, but for the generation that experienced the trauma as a result of it, it becomes a different meaning. We're a little removed from certain words and from certain things, and so like the example that I give is like the N word. I've seen I've been on a bus, for example, and people have said people around my age have said the N word and this and that and so on and so forth, and I'm talking about the one that ends in like AH, or GA, whatever you want to call it, not the hard one. And so they'll use this word, but I've also seen that every time they use this word, like older people flinch. Like you see a physiological response to it. And so I think about that, and I'm like, okay, well, the time where this word was used and people were persecuted and were actually like executed and things like that were happening to them is only 60 years ago. And so when you think about why this person is having such a physiological response, because they may have experienced that, and so for them it's a little different than it's for them it may be a little harder to understand that words can be stripped of meanings because they experience something completely different with it. Uh, but I do get what you're saying. I do understand it. I disagree, and the reason why I disagree is because I think words don't ever lose their meanings. You can give new meanings to words, but I don't think they lose their original meaning or their original purpose, especially again for people who are, you know, victims of it, or people who experience the trauma as a result of it. But I can definitely see what it is that you're saying in your perspective, and I do understand, you know, how coming into, you know, yani the ghariya and being like, yeah, let's stop using this word, how that may just, you know, as you're saying, we've got bigger fish to fry, you know, we've got bigger things to deal with, and I understand that, and I acknowledge that.
I think this is super interesting for us, to, especially in a debate between Egyptian and Sudanese Nubian, because I am, so I don't think you in Sudan, I don't think you're considered too black for Sudan, for example, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't, it's ethnic. Your issues, the struggles are ethnic. While
Mm-hmm.
for us in Egypt, it's ethnic. It has to do with language and culture and ethnicity, but also highly racial, because
Yeah.
we are black to Egyptians. So,
Mm.
so here, let's unpack some of the words, okay?
Okay.
So the equivalent of the N word for an African American, so we are called. I have been called a slave numerous times.
Yeah.
So, but the equivalent of that derogatory term would be barbaric,
Okay.
which means translating to barbarian. Here's the history of it. When Nubians were identified to the Egyptian kingdom, their IDs, of course, only men got this kind of IDs, national identification. It either identified as a slave,
Mm-hmm.
either a Sudanese slave or a barbarian,
Oh wow.
barbaric. Okay, so
Yeah.
for Egyptians, this is just for me as a Nubian Egyptian, it's the equivalent of that. And we had
Mm.
this issue because there was a Nubian actor who went on the show, and his script had him say the word, and we had a huge issue around it. He says, "I'm just repeating," but dude, you don't be the tool for your oppressor. You
Yeah.
don't work for your oppressor. So
Yeah.
here's what happened with this board. We can use it with each other.
No.
Some don't, because it's for our elderly. Our elderly people don't like it.
Yeah.
So, and even when people use it for fun, so like just boys trying to insult each other, it's rarely used, but it's acceptable if we say it.
Yeah.
It's not acceptable for you Arabic speakers outside, especially Egyptians. This is a highly offensive word. You never say it to a new. This was how we were identified, and it's highly derogatory. So other people are not allowed to say it. On the other hand, my grandmother translates the word Nubian in Arabic into Rutana. So for her, the word Nubian in Arabic means the Nubian language, and the word Nubian in Arabic means the language that the people who speak Arabic don't understand. And of
Mm.
course, a long history of songs um, somehow insulting the people who speak Arabic and don't understand Nubian and don't speak Nubian. We have a long history of that. Like if you're Nubian and I don't understand us, go away. And this is this. It's there are so many songs I can send you, and it's all in the spirit of fun. But there's this somehow rejection of the uh, non the rejection of those who do not get the Nubian language that is performed at our weddings and it's performed at our festival. But still, so this very they hold this kind of language, this language so close to heart, but they
Mm.
still take that word that people use and use it as an identifier to their ignorance, just like Indian American, like Indian American. So the running joke is that Native Americans would like to be called Indian because it reminds white people of their stupidity, right? Because it reminds that how people came into the U.S. and came into the new land and thought it's India, right? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
So there is a running joke that says that. Of course, you can go into a debate with so many Native Americans who would say, you can't use this, you can't identify us this way, you have to identify us with our own tribes and tribal affiliation, which is the right way to go. You have to ask people how they are affiliated. But somehow a reappropriation of the word is being used to make it weaponized against people who used it as a derogatory or a false identifier in the first place. So the weapon is the word is taken by people, reversed and weaponized against the oppressor. And this is the same way I see Sultana, especially within the Egyptian context, the Nubian Egyptian context. It's the word is identifying the stupid person that cannot understand movement. To him, I speak Japanese. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do know what you mean. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that in itself, like the existence of the language itself is a form of resistance. Yeah, absolutely. And I see what you're saying in you know, taking the language and then kind of throwing it back at a person who was, or taking a word and throwing it back at a person who was trying to insult you with it, and saying, you know what, I'm going to proudly claim this word for my own. Yeah, definitely. I can see that argument.
But I did not claim it for my own. I mean, that's what our grandparents' generation did. That's what I mean.
Yeah. Okay. Yep.
Grandmother and telling her, "Grandma, don't do this." She would throw a flip flop at you, you know, as all of our grandmothers would do.
Yeah, no, I understand that. Absolutely, I understand that. And I think you mentioned something that's very interesting, actually, Minna. You said that you know, in Egypt, you know, you folks have another issue, and there's an added layer of racism. It's not just an ethnic issue; it's an issue of racism as well that exists. And I think that's a very important thing to recognize. I think in Sudan, the issue that we have is kind of like an anti. Oh, sorry, I accidentally removed myself from the stream. I guess the issue that we have in Sudan is an anti pan-Arab issue, and I guess so. It may be, it's not necessarily a racialized thing, if that makes sense, but there is like a what's the word for it? Like a war of cultures, if I want to say, you know, and what I mean by that is like a removal of, or an erasure of, whatever it means to be African, whatever it means to have those original roots, and to side more with, you know, with Arab roots. And so, yeah, I think we also have that added, you know, complexity that exists there. I don't think per se that we have the racial issue, although there is a lot of racism that exists in Sudan. But I don't think that we personally have the racial issue that's added onto it. I think it becomes a racialized issue when it becomes, you know, when we're talking about, or for example, sorry, let me backtrack. I think it becomes racialized when it becomes the Arab culture versus the non-Arab culture. That's when, you know, people will begin to sometimes, you know, throw racist slurs in there. But for the most part, we don't have that issue. So I empathize with you guys, because you folks have a harder struggle, because not only are you having to deal with ethnicity, now you're also having to deal with racism. And as was shown by Dua Farid, you know, from the Nubian Voices, she was explaining the intricacies of you know, beauty standards in Egypt, and you know, representation, which also adds to that racial aspect, you know, and not the lack of representation also continues to fuel that, you know, that racial aspect that exists there as well. I see somebody backstage. Don't worry, we won't put you on until you're ready. But I definitely understand, you know, what it is that the point that you're making. Yeah.
I'll help off then. I just wanted to interject on that, because the question or the issue was raised several times, and it has several different perspectives into it, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate that different perspective. Thank you so much for that, Minna.
So you look forward to hearing the rest of the day then.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. The next panel, oops, I had changed the time. But I'm going to start the next panel immediately after this. It's going to be Nerdy Nubians. Inshallah, I'll see everybody there for that. All right, Afi, I'll go.